demonic activity. It may sound fun and exciting to hear or read about, but in the real world, such experiences can be truly terrifying and bone-chilling. This was definitely the case for the posters of these next few stories, who encountered strange beings who either had malicious intentions or gave off some very bad vibes. And with that, sit back, say a prayer, and enjoy. It all started when I was 5 to 6 years old and had an imaginary friend called Bombo. He was a small Victorian boy who lived with his mother, who I said lived under the floorboards in the house that I grew up in. I used to talk and play with him all the time, teaching him about things like my Velcro shoes and some of the toys that I had. It was no secret to my family who Bombo was, and even what he looked like from how I had described him. One day, my sister, 14 years old at the time, went back upstairs to our shared room after a family day out and saw him, standing in the corner of the room staring at her. Exactly how I had described him, even down to the detail of the clothes. A few years passed and I was now 10 to 11 years old. Our family had moved house a couple of times and now lived in a 3-story house in a village just out of my hometown. I always had a weird feeling about that house from the moment we moved in, but didn't think much of it over the excitement of having my own room on the top floor with a skylight. After a few months, things started to get strange. Things disappearing, hearing footsteps on the middle of the floor landing at night, etc. These experiences progressively ended up getting stranger, with sounds like nails being dragged up the railings on the top floor, getting worse and worse. As well as some nights my little sister, 3 at the time, screaming, saying that there was a man growling at her in her room. Although my family put this down to an overactive imagination and didn't think anything else of it. It was quiet for a couple of months before everything came back again. But this time, it was so much worse. This was the first time I saw it. One night, I was in my room watching TV and getting things ready for school the next day. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw it. A face peering in at me through my skylight. Its skin was dark red, and its eyes were white with no pupils, only veins, dark circles around its eyes, leading to black cracks across its face. It was grinning at me. Even without pupils, I knew that it had its eyes locked on me. Needless to say, after a few seconds of initial shock, I ran downstairs to the rest of my family and refused to go back into my room. Shortly after this, my older sister, who had given birth recently and was living with us temporarily, had her own experience. As she was sleeping one night, and she heard a knock on her door between 2 to 3 a.m., thinking that I was the one knocking, she shouted "What?" twice with no response. The door flung open after a few seconds, with such a force that the dresser had dented the door from the impact. No one was there. Shortly afterwards, we moved again for personal reasons, to the house that we now have been in for years. For years, there was no unusual experiences, other than the occasional sound of footsteps. Nothing that couldn't be logically explained. When I was 18, my sleep schedule was the same as any teenager, waking up around noon and going to bed around 3 to 4 a.m. This one night in particular, I was up doing the same as always, listening to music, watching films, etc. At midnight, I went downstairs to the kitchen as usual to get some snacks. On my way back out of the kitchen, I saw it again, standing behind the front door, looking in through one of the glass panels. was that same face I saw all those years ago. Same red skin, same eyes, same dark circles and cracking features, staring right at me. This time, with one of its hands leaning on the glass panel. As it watched me, the only difference was that this time it wasn't grinning. After standing there for what felt like an eternity, I ran as fast as I could up to my room and locked myself inside. I didn't sleep a wink that night. Some family friends who were regular churchgoers theorized after they heard what I saw that this thing I had seen was Bombo, or what had taken the form as him in the first place. And when I had stopped giving him my attention and energy, he then had to use another way of getting my attention. But I don't know what to think for sure. All I know is that what I saw was the exact same thing I saw as a child, and it came back. It's been 4 years since the last time I saw it. I hope I never see it again. I, 24 female, moved into a new home about a year ago. I'm renting it and I live on my own. I'm used to living on my own and I'm fairly independent. I'm not religious, but I am open-minded. It's a small house, but the rent is affordable and I don't need a big place. For context, the house is built around a small hallway and everything is connected to it. My room is at the very end. I've never had any issues before until about a month ago, and I think my kitty is picking up on it. There was a stray cat in the park close by that I started feeding. Eventually we grew close, so I adopted her and brought her home. I work from home, so I knew I'd be there to take care of her. The cat adapted really well and I had her checked out by the vet. Everything was fine. I set my room up for her with food, water, a litter box, and toys. She's fairly old and I have a suspicion that she used to be a house cat before. It only took a few days for her, and she started traversing my home soon after. She's really friendly too, despite being a little shy when it comes to strangers. A few days after I brought her home, I noticed a shadowy figure appearing in my hallway. Initially, I shrugged it off, but it's been happening too frequently in a short amount of time. The first incident happened 3 days after her adoption. I was working in my living room and I spotted a large shadowy figure walking towards the living room from the hallway. My blood ran a bit cold, but when I turned to face it, there was no one there. At the end of the first week, I was cleaning up her litter box in my room. I saw the shadowy figure again in the corner of my eye in the hallway. When I looked, it disappeared. After the first week, I started noticing the shadowy figure more and more. Now it feels like I'm losing my mind, because I've been seeing it almost every night. To add to the insanity, I have the constant feeling of being watched. Even typing about it is making me feel uneasy. My cat's behavior also gradually changed during this past month. Like I said earlier, she adapted really quickly. At the end of the first week, I woke up to her howling and hissing in the hallway. I checked on her and she was hissing at nothing. I froze a bit, but left the hallway light on and comforted her. The next week, the same thing happened. I don't have any other cats living in the house and I live alone. This week, I had another terrifying incident, and this is what ultimately motivated me to write this post. I have a family portrait in the hall that I had to take down. I was giving some TLC kitty in my room, and when I looked up to the picture, I saw a shadowy figure behind my niece in the portrait. I could even see its eyes, like 2 white dots staring straight at me. This is when I knew for certain. Whatever I'm seeing is real and I'm not just imagining things. I just closed my eyes and hoped it would go away. I started crying, shaking. I felt really cold, and even writing this is making me feel sick. Like I said, I'm not religious, but my mom is. So I called her and she prayed with me. I opened a Bible, but I didn't look back at the photo for as long as I could. And when I did, it was gone. I threw the photo away. Now my cat is avoiding my hallway completely. And me too. I feel like a hostage. I'm leaving the hallway light on and it helps. To an extent. Does anyone here have any advice? My mind is scrambled. I've been backspacing through this entire post. My mom thinks it's a demon or something, I don't know. I don't know what to think or do. Please help. I don't know if this is relevant, but I've been getting awful nightmares almost every night of me dying in some sort of accident or robbery or even a murder. So a few months ago, I was just sitting on my bed watching YouTube on my phone at around 2 a.m. when I suddenly felt something watching me from my doorway area. I thought I was crazy until I looked at my cat, who was staring directly at that same spot. For 5 minutes, we both just stared at the doorway. She then arched her back up and started making low, guttural sounds. I was freaked out at that point, but there was nowhere that I could go. So I just stared at the doorway. Sometimes I felt like it was more focused on me, but when it wasn't as focused on me, my cat would arch her back up, higher, as though she could feel it watching her more intently. I eventually got up and commanded it to leave my house in the name of God. Once I said that, it was like the atmosphere changed. I didn't feel any watching sensations, and my cat went back to normal and eventually started purring again. I don't know how to explain what I felt when it watched me. I just knew that it was there, and I knew that it wanted to hurt me somehow. It was just a full-body response of it being there, I guess. Since then, I haven't felt anything that strong, though about a week ago I did feel a much lighter watching sensation when I was trying to go to sleep. I opened my eyes and saw some weird figure by my doorway, but just fell back asleep. Has this sort of thing happened to anyone else? When I was 13, I had my first sleep paralysis dream. I couldn't move or talk, but I could look around my room. While I was in this state, I thought in my head if this was normal or not. Again, this was my first experience. Right after I finished that thought, some demon-like creature came out of the floor. It was tall, probably around 7 feet at most. It was very skinny, and its rib cage was poking out of its body. And it also had horns and one giant eye right in the middle of its face. This freaked me the hell out. I tried to scream, but I couldn't. I also tried to move, but I couldn't. Eventually, this demon got to my bedside and just stares at me. After a while, I wake up. I start checking my room frantically, but there was no one in my room. This happened 4 years ago. After that incident, I've been seeing that same demon every time I have a sleep paralysis dream. I have them often too. Every time he appears, however, it's either looking at me the whole time, walking around my room curiously, or stares out my window. Either way, I can say that I'm used to it at this point. But has this happened to anyone else? Having multiple sleep paralysis dreams with the same entity or demon